Well, it's January 23rd, and as you can see, I'm fucking freezing my balls off. But be that as it may, let's do another installment of Grindhouse Purgatory. And I'm going to take you back to the year 1965. I think I was, trying to think now, maybe around 12 years old, something like that. And I had taken a bus down to the Embassy Theater on Main Street in Orange to a kiddie matinee because there was two black and white horror movies playing, and I don't remember them because of the simple reason when I got to the theater and walked past the box office, there was this lurid one-sheet poster for their main features for the week, Bloody Pit of Horror and Terror Creatures from the Grave. Well, I'm looking at this going, fuck, I want to see this shit. So what happened was, the kiddie matinee ended about 4:45, and the early show went on at 5 o'clock. So they had like 15 minutes to roust everybody out of there and things like that. So being it was a big, really dark theater, and most of the kids just bailed out through the side exits and shit, I sort of slunk down in the back in the dark, and there was a couple fucking winos passed out behind there, which they didn't bother. So I pretty much hung out until the show started. They were running trailers. So while they were doing that, I went to the payphone and called home and said I was going to go hang out with a few friends and I'd be home later, much later. So, all right, this unfolds, The Bloody Pit of Horror, directed by Massimo Papillo, I believe, and starring Mickey Hargitay, husband of Jane Mansfield, father of Mariska Hargitay from Law and Order Special Victims Unit, and he's the Crimson Executioner. Well, it opens up that they're executing the Crimson Executioner in an Iron Maiden because he was one of these religious fanatic guys who like to torture and murder people in various disgusting ways. So they put him in the Iron Maiden, shut it, and blood pours out the bottom, and they put a seal on it so nobody will bother him. So now we fast forward up into present day where there's a bunch of models and a photography troupe looking for a location to shoot some covers or photos for lurid horror or gothic magazines or whatever the fuck it is. So they come to this castle. And they think the castle's abandoned, so they break in, but it isn't abandoned. It's the home to this guy, Travis Anderson, a former actor who's sort of gone around the bend. And he has two men servants there that wear striped shirts and white slacks. Yeah, a little bit fucking weird, but then again, he shows up wearing a bathrobe that would probably make Liberace puke. So anyhow, first off, he didn't want them there. Then this one girl, Edith, recognizes him for who he is, and she had a fling with him at one point, but then, told the photographer, Rick, who's played by Walter Brandi, who's in a lot of these things, that, he went around the bend and is secluded and stuff. Well, he relents and decides to let them photograph stuff as long as they stay out of the dungeon. Well, that ain't going to happen. So they go in the dungeon and they're doing all these photo shoots and stuff. Then they have this device, it's like this big board with spikes coming out of it, and I guess it gets lowered onto this guy. So they set this up, they put this poor bastard there, and guess what? The rope breaks and he's impaled. But the rope really didn't break, it was cut. So now we go down in the basement where these people were roaming around and they knocked the seal off the Iron Maiden. And this couple go down there and they're fooling around, and all of a sudden, there he is, the Crimson Executioner. Well, he breaks the guy's neck and grabs the other chick and shoves her in the Iron Maiden, and clunk, shuts the door. So they're all upset about the one guy getting impaled, and yes, Travis is upset too, but he tells everybody to keep their cool. But he has Edith alone. Then he goes off on this tangent about saying that he's found his true calling, that he is the Crimson Executioner. He is going to right all these wrongs because they're doing filthy things in his castle and things like that. And Edith is not going to walk away from this either, and he locks her in a room. So now he goes, let me see now. He goes after Rick or something. Oh, they send one of the guys out to get the police. And we segue to him where he's driving around and around in a circle because he's got an arrow stuck through his neck. Rick gets into a fight with this one of the servants gets knocked out. He wakes up on a bed where this thing is like spiraling down and shit and ready to impale him. But before that, one of the more exotic looking girls is in a room in a spider web with this mechanical spider creaking toward her, dripping poison off its jaws. It's really cheap. I guess they couldn't really get some decent fucking artificial spiders back in the late 50s and early 60s. But anyway, there's any of the web that you hit, there's like arrows on each side of the wall, bows and arrows that'll basically shoot you, but Rick crawls underneath it and gets there too late. So that's when he sends the guy out, and the guy gets the arrow through the neck. He gets knocked out. Like I said, he wakes up on a bed where there's like these worm gears, and there's all these spikes coming down. He's tied to the guy that got killed in the basement, or the dungeon rather. So cleverly, and this is a tedious scene, he uses like a nail trimmer to cut through the ropes, and at the last minute rolls off and gets out. In the meantime, the Crimson Executioner has herded everybody else down in the dungeon. He's got the producer hanging by his neck with this thing, chain up there. He's got the two girls strapped to this contraption where he hits the handles of swords and they go in, cleverly slicing their bras off and cutting them around here, right above the breasts. So then he takes one girl and ties her to the rack, and then the other girl he ties and has this ice water torture thing that keeps dripping on her back. And Rick gets in a fight with one of the servants, the bald-headed guy, and kills him. That's a lengthy little fight. But the other guy is stalking him with a crossbow. So Rick, to basically distract him, puts the corpse of the guy he was in bed with up on a parapet, and the guy shoots him thinking it's Rick, and he falls off, and he goes back and tells the Crimson Executioner that he has killed Rick. In the meantime, Edith gets loose and runs down there only to find that another girl has been tied to the wall, and now they're pouring hot tar on her back. The girl that was in the rack, he's trying to throw into this, I don't know, this dummy with spikes. He calls it the lover of death or something like that. But he takes time to grab Edith and throw her on this oven, for lack of better words, where he shovels hot coals underneath it to sort of heat her up. Well, Rick appears with the body of the original Crimson Executioner. The crossbow guy shoots him. Of course, it's a dummy. They throw it down, but then a fight breaks out. Travis throws the girl out of the way and gets a chain wrapped around her neck, which rips her throat off, so she's dead. The crossbow guy goes to shoot, but then the other girl staggers in front of him and catches the arrow. Rick kills the crossbow guy, then dukes it out with Travis until Travis lunges, grabs the lover of death, and stands there with all the blood pouring out of him and looking down saying, "My pure body has been ruined by the lover of death," and then crash, he passes out. He's dead. Okay, now you got to realize that I'm like 12 years old and I'm loving this shit. So then we go into Terror Creatures from the Grave, which opens up with a guy running into a stable because there's something after him. And this horse is going wild, and the horse basically caves his head in and his eyes hanging out of his head, and the logo Terror Creatures from the Grave comes onto the screen. Well, this lawyer shows up at this guy Gerolimus' estate to do his will. But the problem is Gerolimus has been dead for almost a year. But his wife Cleo and his daughter Corinne are there, as well as his creepy servant Gardner and a maid. Now, they're trying to figure out, how this letter got mailed because it looks current and the seal looks legit, but supposedly the seal was buried with Gerolimus. So how could that be? So they're skirting around, but in the meantime, someone else is killed in the village. The mayor pharmacist is found with half his face burnt off with acid. Strange things are happening, and they have this other guy in a wheelchair, Stimmus, and this doctor's taking care of him, and they're talking about the letter, and he goes, "Can I see that letter?" And he goes, "I have a letter from Gerolimus. Let me pull it out," and the seals are identical. Well, this guy freaks out for whatever reason, and all of a sudden he's in his house all alone, and there's things creeping around outside. And what he does is he takes a sword off the wall and puts it in his dresser in the drawer about waist level. Then he rolls his wheelchair back and hits the fucking sword going full tilt boogie. Blood pours out his mouth and he slumps over on the desk. This really rotting hand reaches out and pulls the fucking chair back, and we get the bird's eye view of his guts like falling out slowly. Again, I'm 12 years old. My first disembowelment scene. Oh, goody. But prior to that, they found a recording in the basement of Gerolimus saying that he has managed to contact the spirits of these dead plague spreaders that are buried in unconsecrated ground outside the estate. What happened was, during the 15th century, these people were spreading the plague on purpose. And they also polluted all the drinking water there. So when they were caught, their hands were cut off, they were killed and buried. And there's like a display case of the mummified hands in the house, or castle, or whatever the fuck it is. So now, it's become apparent that something is going on. So they tried to dig up the body of Gerolimus, and guess what? There's nothing in the tomb. So then the lawyer that was originally called Morgan shows up, and he is spoken to by a dead Gerolimus sitting behind the table. Of course, he passes out. Now, the gardener carries the body of Gerolimus down into the dungeon and has this conversation saying that I promised to keep your secret for a year, but I have to tell your daughter so she can escape. Well, he staggers into the room with all this stuff on his, and this is really good makeup because these things are like bursting with pustules and dripping down his face. And he tells the story about how he was there the night that Gerolimus died, and he didn't die from falling down the stairs in an accident, as everybody was told. These 5 people wanted him gone, along with his wife, because she was having an affair with Morgan. And he had something to blackmail each and every one of them with. Well, while he's ranting and raving about this, Morgan caves in his skull. But before he dies, he puts a curse on everybody. That's what's going on now. So the gardener dies telling this, and all of a sudden the voice comes out of the mirror that, you know, he was trying to get in touch with the spirits of the plague spreaders, and now he's with them. So now they are coming back to wreak vengeance. And of course, Cleo, played by Barbara Steele, gets a face full of plague spores. They find the maid is dead. Morgan is cornered by the plague spreaders and is killed. And the doctor and Corinne, the daughter, and Albert try to escape. The doctor gets sick with the plague, and they keep saying this thing about pure water, pure water. This song kept playing pure water. Well, it seems that the only thing that's going to drive these things back into the ground is pure water, and then a rainstorm breaks out. And that's the end of the film. The film is really creepy, scary, and gothic. It has some moments, unfortunately, it's weak in some points, but overall, it's a really good film and really doesn't get the recognition it deserves. I guess because the prints were so battered from time to time. I know both of them were released by Something Weird Video, and they had a longer version of Terror Creatures, which had some nudity in it. But again, like I said, these prints, were bandied about the country at every grindhouse and drive-in in the world, and they deteriorated at some point. Sinister Cinema had a letterboxed print they put out, but it has a warpage that makes the film fade in the middle sometimes. I know Alpha Oldies has a print out that's supposed to be halfway decent, but probably the best print is on that Nightmare Castle triple feature, the Barbara Steele one, which has an HD 2K scan of an original U.S. print. It's worn in some spots, but it's definitely worth seeing. Yeah, this sort of takes me back and, makes me wonder, because a lot of this stuff is pertinent today. Here you had, the Crimson Executioner, basically who was a religious fanatic who wanted to punish sinners, and today we have the religious right and the evangelicals that want to punish sinners. And as far as plague spreaders go, from Terror Creatures, well, you got anti-vaxxers and people that refuse to wear masks. So what was, done in 1965 or whatever it was done is pertinent today. And another thing is, you got to realize something. I took a bus by myself at 12 years old down to the Embassy Theater, a decaying grindhouse. Okay, I was alone in that theater for over 3 hours. No one bothered me. No one followed me to the bathroom. No one tried to molest me. I was safe. Now, can you say a 12-year-old would be safe any place alone today? Unfortunately, we can't. That's why, people say you sort of live in the past. Yeah, I do, because it was a better fucking time in my estimation. But that's neither here nor there. It's 42nd Street Pete saying thanks for tuning in. Thanks for subscribing. You need anything from me, grindhousepurgatory@gmail.com. For those who don't know, the Grindhouse Purgatory magazine is now discontinued, and don't buy any of the bullshit going around that I'm retired from publishing or writing or anything like that, because it's far from it. I'm starting something new. I shed off some old problems, and the old problems are the ones that are spreading the rumors. So stay tuned, because I'll announce all that stuff when it's all ready to go. So until then, stay safe, and we'll see you on the flip side.